Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Bluedragonfive here.
And Rohith Dhar.
And we're back. Talking more Invincible. Season 3 this time. And not just Season 3, we're talking 3 episodes. That's right, the 3-episode premiere because Amazon had it up the wazoo full of complaints of, like, we love this show, how dare you break it in two, we're getting it all at once again, yet for some reason we're getting 3 episodes on day one just to tease us with hope. But hey, what a way to spend the day. So, yeah, 3-episode premiere. I mean, you're looking forward to talking some dense Kirkman material, Rohit?
Indeed.
All right. All right, let's just without further ado. I think it's safe to say, we're liking. I liked our premiere for season 3 overall, and we'll get into the reasons why as we break down the episodes. What about you, Rohit? Do you like it?
I did. I'm curious to see where things pan out. I've not personally read the comic, so I'm just kind of coming in with as fresh of an eyes and not really any expectations. And so far, where things are going, I'm very intrigued to see how it pans out.
Yeah, I always say this when we talk Invincible, but I I binged through the comics, like the 3 giant omnibuses of Invincible. Like I did it like one time, so I could go into the show surprised when they adapt the material. And boy, just having a general idea of what's coming, but then being wowed by the execution. It's a fulfilling experience, I'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, episode 1. You're not laughing now. Okay, so I guess the kind of start things off just kind of overall. It's going to go through all the episodes, but I one of the things I'm crazy about with Invincible in our episodes, I just love how dense and story driven our episodes are, and I think I think this season even more than last season, we just know this is a big chapter. We did a lot of the legwork in 2, and we're really starting to pay things off in a big way here. So not only we just like we're getting into the story, like we're not wasting any screen time. One could say we're using every part of the buffalo. It's a way to watch a show.
Yeah, and I think with where this sort of season started in the first episode, it's kind of it's a bit of like a calm before the storm, and you kind of feel like, oh, like Mark's like really, being committed to being a superhero. He's like getting along with Cecil, and then just slowly over the course of the episode, things just kind of devolve. And I think this is especially great voice acting work on both Stephen Ewan's part as Mark, and also Walton Goggins' part of Cecil. I think this is really some of his best work in the show, and Walton Goggins' Cecil is one of the better voice acting performances and characters in the show.
Yeah, Cecil's always been really cool, and just Goggins, you're right, he's been knocking out of the ballpark, and this season might be the most Cecil-driven season that we've gotten so far. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I guess just roundabout, just kind of the highlights for episode 1. We start with like the training montage. I think it works really well in establishing the passage of time, because we saw Mark on his heels, with the Viltrumites kind of basically making their declaration that they're coming for the planet, or that he really has to get his act together, or else they're going to send someone worse. Who I gotta admit, I'm very hyped to see towards the tail end of the season. I'm pretty sure he's going to show up, and I have an idea who's going to voice him. And if that guy voices him, I'm gonna be giddy as a schoolgirl. I'm gonna tell you that much. If they got who I think they got to voice that character, I'm gonna be bouncing off the walls.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he's it's just good to kind of show. So time has passed. Mark, he's a lot stronger, which again assists like Cecil's arguments against him. Shows you he's a lot more kind of combat ready for the Viltrumites when it's going to count. So we're getting a lot done here. But also on aside from the plot side of things, we see Mark's in a good place, and I think importantly, Mark and Cecil, they're kind of bonding, and they've always had kind of a. I've always loved the connection between those characters. Mark and Cecil have a good working relationship. He does kind of they kind of respect each other, and at least to a degree. And one could argue we have the immoral kind of makes the point later on. There's a bit of a father figure kind of dynamic going on there, and I think it goes to show that Cecil was the kind of the friend of the family. He was kind of the one who was he was Nolan's boss, at least in quotes. And I think it's I think he kind of helped out the family when they were in need all the time, and he was very much kind of like maybe kind of like fatherly in that regard. And he's kind of getting trained like he was trained with his father, only with someone who he knows, at least at this point, he knows is not a mass murderer.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, yeah, I thought we accomplished a lot just in our opening. That's why I'm talking about like the whole denseness of the storytelling. We really we're hitting our beats really well there.
Yeah, and then part of it's just sort of with Amazon having sort of a more permissive runtime as compared to other streaming services with animated shows.
Yeah.
You get to really have not only breathing room for the main plot, but also sort of the side plots, especially with what goes on with Rex when he's getting his the crap beaten out of him by Multipole.
Yeah, so that's so Rex has had a great arc in the show because it originally starts off very abrasive, and then two it goes through a trauma, and by three, he's really grown after the near death experience. He and Mark are now pals.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have good chemistry with each other. And we have the whole thing with the stealing of the Declaration of Independence. No, not the Nick Cage movie. Different theft of the Declaration of Independence with Fight Master and Dropkick, who I believe are a nod to Karate Kid from Legion of Superheroes, and hilariously cast as Miguel from Cobra Kai.
Also known as Shola Mariduena. But yeah, no, it was interesting to see that whole thing play out because I assume those two, the twins, are going to factor in later on down the line, right?
It could just be I imagine so. Again, I don't want those. Sometimes it can be a throwaway gag like we had with John Hamm in season one. So I wonder if perhaps that might be like if we're going to be jumping through time and multiverses in the show. I can tell you that much. So with that, I imagine we would maybe see the payoff. I don't know how big a payoff it would be, the whole stealing the Declaration of Independence, but it could just be a running gag or like, it's kind of like in The Tick where you had like Cha on the moon, that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm. No, and what was really interesting was seeing the fight choreography between Invincible Rex and the twins, because I think Rex is really having to put in some effort to go against the one twin, whereas Mark is just kind of like placating the other twin, which obviously goes to show sort of kind of how Mark is, with all the amount of training and power he has, he's not like there's no one that's really a threat to him except a version of him potentially.
And just looking at kind of the arc of our premiere again, episode one, we have an example of okay, Mark knows, and this is important too. Like with kind of Mark's journey here, he's probably very one of the main reasons he probably threw himself into training is he's very guilt ridden over Angstrom Levy, and he's I imagine like he's very aware of like the power of his punches now versus then. He's self-conscious of that, and of course by the third episode we see someone who is not as conscious of the power of the punches when fighting twins. So
or is he?
Well, good point. We'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Multipole, voiced by Simu Liu.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was kind of one that Kate had a twin or had a sibling, and two that said sibling was like on the bad guy side. Is Multiple actually like a legitimate bad guy, or is just kind of a hired gun that like works for bad guys?
I gotta be honest. I'm a little lost on Multipole. That's what I'm talking about. It's kind of like the fun of like the read through, where I am surprised by a lot of things. I don't know if Multipole's maybe something original for the show, or if Multipole was he was actually in the comic. But is he? I don't know. I really don't. But I don't know, because a part of me wonders if maybe they wrote a role for Simu Liu, but I don't know. It feels like Multiple is probably a pull from the comics, but I have a feeling they did not use him in this. Like they didn't like this scene is not from the comic. At least this scene as it plays out is probably like I don't think there's a Multiple fight like this in the comic. That's what I'm saying. I'm a little lost in Multiple because it didn't really. I could be wrong. Easily, I could be wrong. That's kind of the fun of the surprise factor. But anyway, I do think it's hilarious so that like essentially he and Kate are like an homage to the Wonder Twins, like full on with the outfits. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, and are just kind of the dynamics of brother sister twins that are at odds or are at opposite sides depending upon I just think to like Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, those kind of
Yeah.
dynamics. Yeah.
So also, Kate Duplicate did not make a lot of friends this season. It's kind of like poor Kirkman. He can't escape this. So we'll talk about more about this in episode 2. But Paul can't catch a break. Every season has like kind of that labeled problem character where not there's I think there's an argument to be made, or like there's just in general like the fandom will just kind of like side against that one character. And
Mhm.
I feel Kate and the Immortal, especially Kate, I think she's going to bear the brunt of it this season. That's the vibe that I'm kind of getting here. But I just like before we get the full on all that with her, just with Multipole though.
Yeah.
Multipole just an idiot. Just he rightfully goes to prison.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of plays sort of the hot-headed brother that probably didn't think much of like whether Kate actually survived and could have just made a copy of it. But I, I guess it's
Yeah,
my thing is like, what was Rex supposed to do? And or I feel like Multipole is just probably the kind of person that just attacks
Rex didn't
any.
do anything wrong.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like Rex like failed to save his sister or like sacrificed her anyway. It was just she got unlucky as well as the other heroes. Um, but no, I think what was really cool that whole sequence is just when Invincible comes in and he just wrecks shop with all the multiple clones and the level of violence is something that kind of makes Invincible stand out, especially in such a medium like animation. But seeing sort of the aftermath of Invincible's fight with Multipole and just the level of devastation laid just just after like these two karate twins from the future or whatever to steal the Declaration of Independence is kind of the fun tonal whiplash of Invincible where you can have this kind of fun comic booky moment and then you eventually over a course of sequences transition to something really dramatic and brutal.
Right.
So, what do you think of the whole Doc Seismic of it all for the first episode? Dragging you there? Well, folks, there's some technical difficulties, but I will try to continue until my co-host comes back. So, to talk about the Doc Seismic of it all, um, for me, I felt like Cecil should have kind of clued in and maybe inquired a little bit more about Doc Seismic's condition or state. Like he's just kind of lying there on the floor with both his hands on the ground. I feel like Cecil could be maybe if not that smart, could have been a little bit more inquisitive about, hey, well, what is Doc doing just laying there the whole time? Are we measuring seismic activity? And I believe that is the sound of Dragon. Dragon, are you back?
Yes, I'm back.
All right. So I was just telling the good folks about the whole Doc seismic of it all. And personally, I feel that Cecil should have been a little bit more curious about what was going on with Doc seismic. Like even though he was in the cell, it's like he's just laying on the ground with both his arms on the concrete or the floor of his cell. I feel like maybe Cecil should have visited and maybe asked questions
I think Cecil made a gross assumption that it wasn't a big deal at the moment. Where okay, look, all the seismic activity going on, like that's not a coincidence. There's a lot of seismic activity.
Mhm.
It's just that's not coincidental.
Yeah, and considering how paranoid and like many steps ahead Cecil is his character, especially when like Damien is it Damien Darkblood from the first season? That's like the
Yep.
Hellboy homage. Like I feel like if Cecil had that level of thinking and that level of like, oh, I need to take account of like this particular player on the board, I feel like Cecil should have maybe gotten. It's like, well, is Doc Seismic have like an enhancement or something? And then like when he tries to figure it out, then all the heroes are taken at that moment. But it just feels like Cecil was kind of caught with his pants down, and I think Cecil is generally a character that's a little bit more prescient about any future threats, and not to say he's omnipotent, but I think he would at least do his due diligence trying to figure out, hey, like we have a supervillain who does earthquake stuff. Let's probably investigate to see if he's still not doing it behind bars.
Right. So I'm sorry, real quick. I remember the point you were making about multipole and like kind of the carnage kind of aftermath of that. And I do want to say I love how that's always been the thing that separates the boys from Invincible. Invincible from the boys is that Invincible is like this is just it's more of like just kind of a grounded reality of like this is what happens when violence happens. Where the boys just feels like at a certain point it's kind of like carnage for the sake of carnage. Just like well we have a standard upkeep for when Invincible is like hey this is if you hit someone at this speed they're gonna bleed.
No, it kind of feels like the boys at times, especially now, there is sort of this implicit notions like, oh, how do we trump the biggest WTF moment from the prior season?
Right.
Whereas Invincible, like the violence, it doesn't seem like the creators behind the show are trying to say, oh, let's make the most messed up moment. It's more about, hey, these characters are going to get into like really serious brawls and violence going to come about from it, and we just let the story take us where it goes.
I just appreciate it's not violence just for the sake of violence or like shock or like just topping itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like that there is like an added effect of like it does kind of sink in like with the aftermath of like all these characters that I can duplicate and everything. It does kind of add to what Kate's power set where like she does have to like violently die. Like her copies aren't always going to survive well. At least they're not going to live long or live well.
And in a way, it's like imagine Cecil seeing all that happening on like some like security camera or whatever. That's a level of violence that I think makes Cecil a lot more cautious and skeptical of Mark's intentions. Because even if Mark thinks he's a good guy, like the way he goes about dealing with bad guys is it's brutal. Uh,
Absolutely. So on a happier note, real quick, because things get really serious in our 3 episodes here. Mark's home life. He's the man of the house now. He's been training Oliver, and I'd like to see that. I'd like to say that these are kind of some parallels to season one, where he's kind of stepping into the shoes of his father. With Oliver kind of as the young Mark,
mhm.
and he's just kind of thrown for a loop. Like, oh God, he forgot to take into account the whole alien physiology, where this guy's like he's part, essentially he's part space bug, which means he ages a lot faster. So he's getting his powers a lot earlier than Mark.
Yeah.
By the way, I love the act. I don't know the actor's name offhand because I don't know if he's an unknown or not. But the actor who plays Oliver, I thought he sounds so much like a real kid, and I really appreciated that.
He's the kid who plays the main kid lead in Netflix's Sweet Tooth.
Oh, it's him. It's one. I love Sweet Tooth. That's good. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no wonder it was good. Oh, that's really good. Oh, anyway, point being, Oliver. Oliver's really interesting this season. And again, we'll get more into that with as we go on. But meanwhile,
Christian Christian Convery is the name of the actor.
okay, all right. So the let's talk about Mark's relationship with Eve.
Mm. Yeah, I like sort of the dynamic between Mark and Eve, but I will say I kind of feel like there should have been a little bit more work towards them becoming a couple.
Well, we saw it wasn't easy though. Like it took him like it took him another episode, and like to be fair, he went through a lot of trauma and pain and stuff before
True.
before they went through it. Plus, in all fairness, we saw they have chemistry. They had a spark. Had she not been with Rex, they probably would have gotten together. There was a lot of it takes Eve some believable kind of time to wrap her mind around it. And plus, we have Mark kind of put his foot in his mouth. However, I like that ultimately he was kind of right for doing what he did, but he did it in the most clunky way, which dragged it out. He
Mhm.
dropped the truth bomb on her about the alternate future. A big theme, one of the two main themes of this season seems to be, because we say it a lot, usually Oliver, but we say it a lot, no secrets. So I think Mark just kind of leading by example there. He's not keeping any secrets from Eve.
Mhm.
You
But
know?
also to the same degree, Oliver's whole thing's about keeping promises, and
Mm-hmm.
Mark, did keep his promise to alter future Eve, of
Mm-hmm.
deciding a direction, and for all intents and purposes, I think, uh, Mark made a. Even though I can understand from Eve's perspective how she kind of feels a little bit, trapped or manipulated by what Mark revealed to her, it, and I think what's
Well,
especially
she said yes before she knew about it too, which I think
no,
helps.
no, but like I think the thing that was really interesting on a like character level is that like man, 20 years from now when things go to hell, I still think back to like the guy had like a high school crush or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sort of speaks to a thing in I think for superhero stories, there's kind of this notion that like when you go on these like grand, trips to the future and are aware of like what happens or whatever, like there's this sort of destiny takes over. But I think for Invincible, there's a focus on making these superheroes feel really real. And I think for someone like Eve, who's very independent, who's very self assured, if she's made aware of the fact that like a future version of herself is still have like this lost flame, it does kind of feel like a bummer, right? Because imagine like if you're a guy and you find out that like, oh, you're still hung up on your like ex girlfriend from 20 years ago, you kind of feel like man, is there nothing else going on in my life and I'm still holding on to this? And I don't think it's belabored to the point to where like ultra future Eve is made to be like a loser or anything like that. But I appreciate that like Eve maybe takes a while
It
to
was
kind
a
of
regret.
yeah. I think where Eve ends up with going with Mark, I think it was appreciated that Eve has to take time to kind of understand what she feels about Mark and just embarking on just going with how she feels about him rather than thinking about what it means down the line. And I think that's something that, both Mark and Cecil maybe have to learn, especially in light of what comes about from the start of their conflict near the end of the first episode.
Yeah, I'm gonna tease you with this, Rohit. You know, Mark and Eve's relationship is something really. It's like one of the. Well, look, I don't want to just want. I'm not just going to throw this out there. A lot of people have said it's like one of the best relationships in comics. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to say that, but I will say it's a really compelling. It's a good relationship that has an arc, and given the amount of seasons that we've already been pre-approved for this,
Mhm.
I think we're in for. I think we're in for a good ride with where these two are probably going.
Yeah.
Plus, I think it helps that they have good chemistry already, and they've kind of had it from the beginning. So I think that's. I
And
don't know why. I've said this from the beginning. I can't tell you why. I've always really loved this Mark Racing character. I always root for him. And he's got kind of like this. Well, again, he's very Peter Parker, Spider Man, very which is intentional. I know it's very Peter Parker. It's very Charlie Brown. I don't know. There's something I like about this kid.
I think he's a lot. He's probably the most everyman of the three that you compare. I think Charlie Brown's a little bit more of a unique kind of situation, but I think comparing to
Well,
Peter,
I'm just throwing Charlie Brown. I don't know, it's because it's around
yeah,
Valentine's. I'm just throwing Charlie Brown out there. But the
no,
point
but
being, he's very Spider-Man esque.
yes and no. I think yes because he's sort of a young superhero, like trying to find his way in the world. No, because I think unlike Spider Man, Mark, in a way, doesn't have the kind of baggage that Spider Man has in terms of sort of the like how he became a superhero and sort of the support network. Because the thing is, like Spider Man, the early comics, he's on his own. He's very sarcastic. He's kind
This
of
is
like
he has a lot of help versus Spider-Man here because he's got the GDA, he's got a bunch of super friends, he's got all he's not doing it all alone as Spider-Man really did
yeah,
early on.
and before the powers, like Mark was just a nice, like cool regular guy. Whereas Peter, before the powers, he had some like angst and antisocial tendencies that over through the course of being Spider-Man, he grows out and becomes a better person. For all intents and purposes, like the powers don't make Mark necessarily a greater person. I think it just extends what Mark was just like as a person.
It's kind of the Captain America philosophy, it's just more just it magnifies what was there already.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, all right, so the whole Doc Seismic plot. So essentially, again, I love that we kind of continued one of my favorite elements from season two here, which is I loved how we took like a trope in comics, and we do this all the time in Invincible. We kind of reinvent or like kind of comment on the old comic tropes, where we take like the campy, like we took the Lizard League, like essentially like like the serpent, like kind of a serpent society esque kind of thing. That's either campy or where it's like Cobra from DC comics. We just kind of like just going to override and we brush them off. It's like, okay, they have a snake gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
And, they were quite horrific. They were underestimated and it was everyone's mistake. And here at Doc Size, we did kind of a similar thing. We took kind of like the mole man level, threat, and we've really shown like how dangerous and he can be when underestimated, like Cecil kind of did here, where, he kidnaps all the heroes and tries to kill them.
Yeah.
He
And what's
almost succeeds. He pretty much succeeded, but Cecil had to play. I love how desperate it was. Cecil had to use his last resort, which he had at the ready, but he didn't want to have to use because he knew it was going to stir the pot the moment he used them.
No, but what's interesting about it is that even though he didn't succeed in killing all the heroes and whatnot, he did succeed in one respect because he has his monologue about like, oh, you heroes are defenders of the status quo. You must unchain yourselves and bring about a revolution. In a way, because of his whole situation of capturing the heroes and then forcing Cecil's hand to bring in the likes of like the undead soldiers and Darkwing 2, it lit a spark from Mark being the revolutionary in a way. And the fact that like over the course of 3 episodes, like the the Guardians of the Globe split, and now you have two separate disjunctive superhero teams, and Cecil's now not like the man in charge of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of this season, especially with the next two episodes, it has a lot of Civil War in there, and there's definitely a big Civil War vibe going on here. Like, in a sense, I guess Seismic was kind of the de facto Zemo in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of, I think, where Cecil's arc has taken him is kind of where how characters like Nick Fury and Amanda Waller really been characterized,
Oh,
where
absolutely, yeah.
especially like post 9/11.
Yeah,
I
there's
think with
a lot of
yeah.
fury. It's kind of like that scene in Avengers where we're calling out fury on phase two. It's a lot of that.
Well, I think more sort of how in the comics, like if you're familiar with the event Secret War, that was an event where Nick Fury recruited a bunch of heroes to like invade Latvia, and this was when like Doctor Doom was like not ruling the country, and the prime minister's loading of weapons, and he wiped all the memories, and it led to like a terrorist attack, and eventually Nick Fury had to leave Shield and all that stuff. And I think in this respect, like this is kind of Cecil kind of being thrown off the throne. He's not the guy that everyone will just kind of bow down to. The fact it's not just Mark, but other heroes, went away from the Global Guardians. It's I'd be very interested to see, getting a more deep into Cecil's head beyond just what we saw in the flashbacks. Cecil has to kind of be worried about if he's able to maintain his hold on the superior community.
That's a good point. All right, let's see. So, anyway, in episode one, we bring in the Reanimen, D.A. Sinclair's Reanimen, who we did set up, and although we kind of it set up this contingency at the end of season one,
Mhm.
um, we had a Darkwing sidekick, his very unstable, at least formerly unstable sidekick from season two. So he's brought in. He very much he kind of runs point and saving the day here, which he's very invaluable. But we'll get into the whole debate there. But anyway, so we save the day, but it's a huge red flag for Invincible. He feels very betrayed by Cecil, which leads to the argument in the White Room, which we're going to pick up on in a second. But just to shout out our post-credit scene, Alan and Nolan bonding in space prison. This is kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's what I want to tee up about this. So the issue I have with the Invincible comics, at least in the, the issue I had in the Invincible comics, just binging through it, is that I don't think we transition between those two plot lines well in the story, like because there was a lot of time dedicated to Nolan and Allen like doing space prison stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now the vibe that I get here, mind you, I can't accurately judge it based on a post credit scene, but I mean so far, and we'll get into this with the other two episodes. I think thematically and just with what we have seen via post credit scene, I got a feeling I think we're going to turn that around. And again, that's the big thing that with Kirkins and doing and readapting the work here is that I think we've kind of looked at the story and we've seen how can we improve upon certain things or condense it or kind of adapt it to the medium a little better and just and I have a good feeling. I think we're going to really weave this into the narrative in a more interesting way than it was in the comic. But again, the way it reads in comics is very much okay. Maybe there's a few issues here about just all Nolan and Allen in space, but when you're really dialed into the Mark story, you don't want to just shift gears for that long, or like it's back and forth. It feels like you're distracting from the interesting stuff. But yeah, this pace,
Oh,
yeah.
so it bounced from issue to issue rather than just like within the same issue. It's like, oh, here's the Mark stuff and here's the Nolan stuff. Or
To
what?
my recollection, all I know is we had a lot of Allen and Nolan stuff in space, and I did kind of check out with it a few times when I was really dialed into what basically like when we're doing all this stuff that we're seeing, the whole Mark and Mark versus Cecil kind of era of Invincible. And this is roughly where it does happen. We're doing this, and then we have all the alien stuff, which I mean I like that, but it's just the back and forth. I mean I want to say it was like you have like an issue of Mark and an issue of them, and I don't know. I don't think we really either we split the difference and we did kind of interweave them a little bit, but it really feels like there was like a lot of stretches of Allen and Nolan, kind of doing their thing before we. And I'm not going to say it was like a lot, but I'm just saying it disrupted it felt more like it disrupted the flow than it did like serve the greater story, which I really have a feeling that we could do here.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe the medium of comics wouldn't allow because we have to really show, okay, what are Nolan and Allen doing in the meantime? And then we could maybe kind of make a meal out of an issue here and just kind of do some fun space stuff. Yeah, I don't know. It's anyway. So let's transition to episode 2. Right, let's talk. So episode 2, a deal with the devil. Now this is I think this might be my favorite of the 3. I don't know. I really like this one.
I agree. It's my personal favorite of the 3, and I think it's a lot of people's favorite of the 3 so far, from what I've heard.
Yeah, it's got. I mean, it probably helps too. Like we tee it up at the end of 1, and then I don't know. We obviously have the big. There's a huge moment in 3, but still, deal with the devil. We get a lot going here, and I think for starters, before we get back to the White Room conversation, I love what gets us there. So we had the Cecil flashback, which I thought. Again, I can't remember. I do remember we did see Cecil's origin in an issue of Invincible. I think it was maybe like if again, I want to say if memory serves, it was like kind of like a supplemental, like here's a Cecil comic for you.
And it's like titled "The Secret Origin of Cecil
Yeah,
Coleman." Yeah.
yeah. So I think it was just more of like kind of like a backup story than it was like like an actual flashback that fit into things. So I love the way it's fantastic placement in the episode that arms us the audience with information Mark doesn't have that recontextualizes everything. And I think and I really can't tell you where people came down on the whole, in regards to our Civil War conflict, if people are on the side of Cecil or Mark or not. But regardless, I think a little bit like the MCU, a little bit, but again, I like that we really kind of like the movie versus the comic to a degree with Civil War, and kind of like what we're doing here, maybe. I think we really flesh out both sides. So there's a really compelling argument. At the very least, we do that here.
Where do you stand on the Mark versus Cecil argument?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I think. Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's a clear cut answer. But if I had to pick a side, I think I'm on. I think I'm on Mark's side. But I want to be clear. I'm not like, aggressively against Cecil though, because I think Cecil has a point. And I like that we see that point. But I think the way Cecil, I think Cecil was promising transparency, and he didn't deliver on transparency. That's why ultimately I think I side with Mark.
I side with Cecil because I feel like with as much as Mark is angry about, you know, DA Sinclair and Darkwing 2, I guess it just feels like Mark to my in my view, and maybe this speaks to sort of my morality about this. For these, for these villainous individuals, if you can through whatever means be
I
able
don't
to.
think we have to take a side, by the way. I just want to be clear about
No,
that
no,
here.
no.
We don't.
I'm not trying to. I'm not trying to say. I'm not trying to force anyone to take a big side. But I'm just thinking, from my perspective, I kind of see where I think I side with Cecil more on the fact that you're, if we're trying to stop bad guys, people that were in the wrong path and could be reformed. And now I think where maybe I would be more cautious in supporting Cecil is because I'm not clear about what's the level of reform or rehabilitation that's put upon individuals like D.A. Sinclair and Darkwing 2. Are they actually going through traditional psychological treatment and help and are hoping to see the light there of their ways and wanting to reform and be better people? Or is there some like, forced hypnosis or something where their like autonomy and free will are kind of compromised? And then that's where I think like Cecil being a closer approximation to the likes of Amanda Waller, I think is valid and is a warranted critique on him because for me, it's less about don't use bad guys or don't have people who did wrong, try to be good guys, but it's like what are the means of doing that? And I feel like if it was made clear about like what's the level of sincerity on the part of the villains, I think I would be maybe more swayed to Mark's point. But I think I feel like in my view, it's like, does Mark now believe in redemption or think that bad guys could have the opportunity to turn good? It's like if they did wrong, they're out. And that whole point about Angstrom while below the belt, I feel like Mark, in a way, as much as Mark has a principled point of view against Cecil, there is a level of emotion involved in how he's going about Cecil, especially with what happened in the season 2. And as much as Mark can won't admit it to himself, Mark in his mind maybe thinks, what if there's just other versions of me that are unredeemable, and I'm getting closer to that point. And then he kind of just lashes out at Cecil and what he represents because he thinks that's the end point that Mark is afraid of reaching. And considering what we know Cecil's background, Cecil was Mark, back then, and now I think Mark has sort of a substantiated fear of turning out like Cecil.
Yeah. So there's a. So I think I ultimately, and I think we'll break it down when we get into like the actual argument. But I really think that it's. I think they're both right, but I think they're also both they're both kind of wrong about they're both wrong. They're ignoring certain things about their arguments.
Mhm.
I think they're both. I think they're both. I know it just sounds like a cop that answer, but again, we'll get into the specifics. I think they're both. Ultimately, I think they're both justified, but they are both kind of neglecting something that both kind of in the wrong about something as well. Anyway, building to that, the Cecil flashback. I love that. It's this. It's just again we bolstered kind of Cecil's stance in kind of our Invincible, or kind of our Kirkman version of Civil War, which makes things very layered. We had the origin story in which he's haunted by the 17 people who died. We see he did really care. He keeps the scars a reminder. He had this horrific thing happen to him, a near death experience in itself, and he lucked out and got his skin back and everything. But he keeps the scars the reminder of like he screwed up and 17 people died. He kind of takes himself to task for that. Um, like basically Cecil is initially is a character who doesn't compromise, but over time it's been kind of beaten out of him by bureaucracy. It kind of feels like.
No, and I think that gives that recontextualizes that one really significant moment from the first season, where after the first Guardians of the Globe's deaths, he cleans up everything except that one speck of blood, and then
Yeah,
Rex is like, "Hey, you missed a spot." I was like, "No, I'm leaving this here to make you guys realize you think you're hot shit. This is what happens."
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it fits absolutely fits him like a glove.
Hmm.
I also really like the I think the writing's just so good on this show. I love like we had like the really casual like when Cecil finds out about Oliver, he has concerns that obviously the family they're a little distrustful of Cecil, but they we have like the whole Oliver, he really likes Cecil. He's he has a connect. It's a connection to his father in a sense. Obviously, Oliver's got some issues in in kind of not factoring in like what exactly like like the implications of his father's relationships on the planet were.
Hmm.
But it's still like he's Oliver's looking at the world glass half full, let's call it. But regardless, I love the detail that he had like Debbie like make does the makeup on him so like they can go places, to go to the zoo and everything, and like he missed the spot on like the side there, and that's a great foreshadow for the next episode. I thought that was great. We did like the little lighthearted version, missed the spot, and Cecil saying that to him.
Yeah.
And we have like the darker kind of reveal of the origin. I don't know. I think it's cool. Anyway, so point being, he kills the bad guys like right on the spot, very much in Mark's position on things. So I think the core theme of season three is distilled down to this brilliant line from the book that we use very well, and we call it back in the episode, which I think makes episode two so far the best of the bunch. Uh, we can be the good guys or the guys that save the world. We can't be both. I think it's a brilliant line that economizes the whole point of season three, where that's what Mark and Cecil, especially Mark, are really kind of reconciling in themselves. Like, what is the right way to be a hero in the world of Invincible? Where you do have to face the realities of, and we did set this up at the top of two, where Mark, he felt responsible for the death of all the seemingly the Maulers got killed, but we had all the multiverse of Maulers and everything, and Angstrom Levy, and he felt kind of guilty about that. And Cecil was kind of reassuring him that it was for the greater good, essentially.
Hmm.
So again, we've been kind of toying around with these themes, and now we're facing them, dead on, like the whole the greater good, and like you might compromise, like what it means to be good. If it again, it's the whole Amanda Waller way of looking at the world, as you've been kind of saying, Rohit.
Yeah, and I think where sort of the flashback ends for him, after he kills those two, terror supervillains that they captured just a while back, and him having to go to jail. I think the fact that he is able to run the jail kind of made him get around to Radcliffe's thinking, because if in his mind, if he's able to convince, persuade, or cajole these like hardened criminals to,
It was so unfair that he was put in that prison. By the way, so like they're giant. Everyone's like a superpowered giant killer.
Mhm.
But you're right, though. I love that. Like, what's your name? And then he has that he's basically is the giant blue sumo guys is lieutenant now.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's pretty cool. But you're right, though. That's kind of what got him to his line of thinking. And even though like Radcliffe does still have to kind of like it's wonderfully crazy. He offers him the job, and he's kind of saying this was not just it wasn't just a punishment. It was it was kind of your lesson essentially.
Mhm. And I kind of appreciated that, like, once when Cecil gets into the role, it's not like, oh, I just was in prison for a while and now I'm director. It's like
He's
him,
judged.
yeah, yeah, and Cecil like is aware of that right away, and then just calls it out on it, and is able to command respect later on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love that he's like not having to like I know you all want me dead, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, Christmas comes early is a good line.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so the debate with so the White Room, so the debate between Cecil and Mark. I think it's great that Cecil calls out Mark's. So essentially, Cecil calls out Mark's hypocrisy and his temper, which we have seen on display here, and I love that. I love that throughout this, Cecil, and this is what really sells me on. Again, I'm really close to being on Cecil's side through this, but again, like I said, there's something holding us back from I think either side. Is that Cecil is regretful and rational during this, kind of quote unquote fight, where he's basically telling Mark to calm down, which is like the thing where you have someone who's getting a little hostile and you tell them to calm down, they're going to do something not calm. And that's the thing that has been Mark's problem, though, is this temper. I mean, I think Mark is guided by the right thing to do here, and like he's not. He's not actually. I don't think at any point he's actually going to hurt Cecil. But these random men are really on his last nerve, and they are expendable. So he's airing out some frustration here. But still, it's throughout this. I love that Cecil. The way this escalates, Cecil regrets that this all of this is a last resort and was not meant to be displayed during just a disagreement between the two of them. He didn't want like the necessary reflex of these guys attacking him out of like it's like that's what they're programmed to do or whatever. He didn't want it to come to this. He wanted just to explain this to him and get him because like during the whole fight, well again I don't even want to call it a fight even, but just during the whole conflict, the altercation.
Mm-hmm.
When he's teleporting and everything, he's just trying to get Mark to calm down and go back. He's he's telling you what you see. Really, you didn't think I could change from the beginning? Like, no, I do think that, but at least I did think that. I didn't want to have to use any of this. I'm absolutely sympathetic to Cecil's plight here, where this is a misunderstanding that is spiraling out of control here. But the reality situation, I think, ultimately boils down to on Cecil's side is that Cecil has, as he says, like, look, you think they don't know what's going on here? He's promising full transparency, but he didn't tell Mark. I mean, I know this is not a perfect example, but look, many cases, Superman gives Batman the kryptonite because he knows this might be necessary one day. Mark, I think if he explained it to Mark, I think Mark might have been on board with this, knowing what happened with his father. I mean, if I know Mark's hot headed, that's the thing. It would have been an easy conversation to have.
Not only just like with his dad, but also like how many multiverse.
Oh, the Viltrumites, yes.
Yeah.
So I think Cecil absolutely. I think he played too cloak and dagger on here. So by that logic, I think Cecil is right, but I think he went about it the wrong way. And on the flip side, I think Mark's right for feeling upset with Cecil, and also the reality what Cecil's doing here. He has the scene that Mark has with Rick, telling him like telling the victim that he D.A. Sinclair got hooked up with a bigger lab. He's not really sorry for what he's done. And you're right, though. We do have the question of how much reconditioning has happened. Cecil has a throwaway line saying they've been through serious psychological, I don't know if he says programming or not, but psychological, he did something might have been done to him, but we don't know. It might have just been like, he just might have been like actual counseling, might have been something more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, last time, I'm just basing this off the end of season 1. Sinclair was, nothing was different about him. He was just like working under the boot of the government. That was, it's essentially, it was like Armin Zola, pretty much.
Just kind of barked at him to shut up, and that's pretty much it. And it's like, at least Darkwing 2,
Darkwing, that's where the debate really happens, though. So on one hand, D.A. Sinclair, I think Mark's absolutely right about using D.A. Sinclair's stuff and like letting him roam, essentially not face consequence for what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. I think Mark's right about that. Darkwing's actually a good that's a good argument to have between the two. Where that's where we get to the heart of like Mark blindly shutting down rehabilitation, which I always from Batman the Animated Series, I always loved that Batman believed in redeeming his villains, and he really did invest in their reform, and he always kind of crushed them when it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And we did it so many times in the Animated Series, we did it so well every time. I really do think, and it's just I love exploring that here. And we saw Cecil was capable of this in prison. He essentially did that in prison. And I think he absolutely has a point. Darkwing he did spiral out of control. He was taking care of Midnight City. He did snap. He did kill people, which is bad. I think there's a chance at reform there. I think he's, at least so far, I don't know if we did anything to him, like electroshock him, anything, or hypnosis or whatnot, or we made him into a Winter Soldier. I don't know.
But I think if I were to make a defense of Darkwing 2, it's like he only killed criminals.
Yeah.
And, it's not like
so far Cecil's permitted all over the place in the show.
Yeah. And Darkwing 2, throughout the 3 episodes has been pretty much above board for the most part.
Well, I
So
mean, the worst thing that Darkwing did was, he tried to banish Invincible for unjust reasons to the Shadow Dimension. So that was like the worst thing he really did.
mm,
So, but by that logic, there was a good case for him, him actually making a stab at reform here. Plus, Cecil promises again, in kind of an unsettling way, he kind of promises he will never kill anyone again. Suggesting that, yeah, we'll maybe we'll Suicide Squad him. We'll put a bomb in his head or something.
mhm,
So, yeah, I mean, I just think it's really interesting. So, by that logic, again, and again, there is hypocrisy there because again, Mark's kind of on he's wavering on the reform of his father. And now, mind you, I'm not saying he's there yet with it. I'm not. I know he has the scene with Oliver later on, but for the time being, I think that was just something he was saying to the kid. I don't think he was lying about it, but I think it was a very distant, optimistic viewpoint. I really think that he's not quite there with his father yet, but I think Cecil can kind of see the writing on the wall that Nolan kind of helped him out, and he might be having that on his mind, but he's just shutting down the possibility, even though his father, kind of is somewhat helping them through this Viltrumite conflict.
mhm. But also, I think what's noteworthy is that for this universe, I mean, and you may be able to correct me if that's not the case later on, depending upon what they adapt for the comics. The superhero universe of Invincible doesn't have kind of the long, lengthy history of like heroes becoming villains for a bit and villains becoming heroes for a bit. So I think in Mark's mind, it's like I wonder if part of it's just like there's no precedent for like anyone that becomes a hero in this world stays a hero for the most part. Anyone that becomes a villain stays a villain for the most part. There hasn't been sort of like the history for DC Marvel of like heroes going bad, villains going good. And I think I wonder if that kind of is a factor, not like literally in Mark's mind, he's thinking of the meta like trope of superhero fiction, but just the fact like once a villain, always a villain.
I mean, to my knowledge, to my recollection, I would say that it's pretty much like I'm the Man was like the big example. There was a shock of like a hero had kind of turned villain, and I mean, I guess just looking at this, perhaps there were other cases that were short lived, with like the Order of the Fist people who got killed. It might have been like, but again, very short lived, literally.
Mhm.
So I don't. I'm not. So I guess publicly, as far as all the heroes would know, it would probably be Omni Man as like the main example of that. Otherwise, it's I think it is a very relatively new concept. So I think it's a pretty accurate read.
Yeah.
I would say, at least to my knowledge. See, basically in the comic, like the Omni Man thing went down like you saw. It went down at a different point in the story. Like I think. I want to say the Omni Man twist happened like by issue 3 instead of the end of episode 1.
Mhm.
I think that was the main difference there. Anyway,
But there's not like any sort of like villain that turns
no,
good.
not to my knowledge. No,
Mhm.
no, I'm not the authority on it, but I'm just saying from what I read, I think that would have been something they would have mentioned a lot more. I won't say there might be a character we might do that with down the line, but we haven't done it yet.
Okay.
So I'll say that much. Anyway, so okay, point. I do love that with the Darkwing thing. We have that handshake moment by at the end of the episode where he puts him on the new Guardians team, and you see the unease and the disappointment in himself in Cecil, where he kind of like, even though I think he has a fair case for trusting Darkwing. At the same token, though, I think he does feel on some level he feels disgusted with himself for where the man he is now that has kind of gone to like the Radcliffe's kind of way of thinking versus the younger man he was, when he shot the two.
Yeah, because the thing is, Darkwing 2 was it seems like going to be utilized in a more stealth covert ops kind of
Yeah,
context.
and now he's being put on the team, which even Donald says, like, "Are you sure about this?"
Yeah, I kind of wonder if maybe that speaks to the level of psychological reform that's been done with Darkwing, where maybe it's not that much, or maybe it's like he's put under a very tight leash.
Hmm.
And I think Donald, him having those doubts, I'm very interested to see what happens with Darkwing 2 on the team.
So let me say this before we break down the rest of the Guardians. So I love the long game that we're playing here, which the long game, at least that we're presumably kind of attempting here. Long game is like this is how we the path of this whole seasons, this whole like the whole redemption, the whole like good guys or the good guys save the world can't do both things. That you know can we it's like the question of can we redeem Omni-Man post all the horrible stuff he's done at the end of season one. I think that's kind of like that's the long game that we're kind of playing here with this with all this conflict and all this discussion and kind of like schism that's going on here, like, and we're weaving it in thematically, like I said, a little better in the comic between this and like Nolan kind of going through a redemptive thing in space right now with Alan.
Hmm.
So I like that again. It's like we're not dropping it like while we're on the planet versus when we check in with Nolan. So even if we're not seeing Nolan, we're kind of getting a feel for where we want Nolan to be. So that's what I think is really doing it for me here.
Yeah.
Okay, so the whole Kirkman Civil War thing here. So I love the scene in which Mark he's hit with the main contingency, which I love that we saw. I love seeing all the pieces come together. Like we saw like the him go up against the Kraken, and we have like the sonic sound that like the high pitched frequency that hurts Viltrumites, and we've set it up that Cecil implanted that not just in the earpiece but in his head. Like oh god, and he just frantically he's in the Guardians lair. Cecil did not want because he knew it's just going to be. It's not that he's afraid of this happening because again he's not going to back down for anything here, but he didn't want it to go down this messy. And we just have this wonderfully messy situation in which Invincible has made a lot of friends by this point. Rex and the team, like they really like him. They trust him versus Cecil, who was like he's like Cecil's trying to kill me, which clearly we know Cecil's not trying to kill him, but it doesn't look good.
And he's always kind of the government suit that
Mm-hmm.
is kind of always at a distance with the rest of the superhero community.
Yeah,
Like as far as I know, and I'm curious, and maybe Dragon, you can provide some level of context or contrast. Um, it seems that outside of Mark, Cecil doesn't really have much of close relationships or interactions with the other superhero community. So I assume that's just similar degree in the comics.
yeah, that's pretty. I would say that's accurate. I don't know. It feels like is a little bit more of a personal touch in the show, but like for example, I think the scenes with Cecil and Debbie, I think, have a lot more weight in the show than the comic. But I'm not saying they don't. He still interacts with the Grayson family. We don't see him interact with the other families aside from the Grayson family. I'll tell you that much. Like for example, I don't think we've ever seen him have a scene with Eve's parents.
Hmm.
I don't think we even really ever. I don't even know if we ever do that. So I would say, yeah,
Well,
it's like
and I think considering what we see in the flashback episode, like does Cecil just see a lot of himself in Mark, and maybe that's why he takes a shine to him, whereas other heroes maybe just doesn't see that kind of commonality.
I mean, I think what ultimately it boils down to is I think Cecil's always had a great deal of respect for Mark after he stood up to his father when he had a chance to just go alongside him. I think because of that, that's where he really he already kind of I think he already kind of like I think sorry let me put it this way, right, you're right, it's just that in the beginning, I think he saw a little bit of the get up and go and the earnestness that Cecil once had, like when he was kind of wanting to help out and like kind of be like a more willing and cooperative version of his father that may have been like a younger Cecil. I think he saw a little bit of that in the beginnings before we knew what happened with Nolan.
Mhm.
And then by the end, I think he truly respected Mark. I think he just kind of liked him, and then he kind of respected him for like, okay, he went up against his father, which obviously is, it's a bitter thing for any young man to do. So I don't know. I think that's when they really became close, and then became kind of kind of boss and employee. To then I think by season three, at least at the top of it, maybe a bit of a father figure thing going on there. Maybe
Yeah.
I think it's been an arc. Anyway, so Rex and company. So again, they see Invincible, they see Mark in trouble, and it looks really bad what Cecil's doing to him. Like he's sicking the guys, the horrific zombie looking bad guys we've established are bad.
Hmm.
And this Mark is like writhing in pain, and again, I love what we do it through Rex. By the way, he just shows like season one Rex. I don't know if I think ultimately he would have more reluctantly joined the fray. The fact that he's leading the charge and Rex is so much more likable now, and just like seeing that his friend who was like by his side and like put him in the field and they were bantering in episode one, he's in agony and he possibly might die, is like, okay, you know what, screw this, we're not letting Cecil, just take him away and do horrible stuff to him. We're gonna help him out. It's just great, and I love that we have this moment where Cecil, he tells Reanimen to stop, and they don't. I wonder how much of that is just it's a delayed shutdown, or if it's like it's like a reactionary program where they're being attacked, so they have to respond. But yeah, sorry, go on.
I could see it either way. Um, I guess like maybe if you're trying to be optimistic, probably the former. But if you're cynical, maybe the middle of the latter. Because then at that point, like does Caesar really have a handle on reforming or keeping these villains in line? Because as much as Cecil thinks he can operate or make sure he's 10 steps ahead of everyone, he wasn't ahead of Doc Seismic, and I feel like him, kind of being
I think Cecil's got too much New Yorker in him. I think he's got too much been there, done that, seen it all, and that's why he's underestimating these villains. That's what I think. I think Cecil has seen too much.
he's kind of has the baggage experience, and it's not letting him think in more innovative or dynamic ways.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I love there's a subtlety in this moment that really got me, where there's a pause after the Reanimator essentially, well, I guess slowly but surely shut down or what have you. Point being, they're not putting as much of a fight when they're after they beat Invincible senseless after the whole the ear thing. Robot shuts that down.
Mhm.
Um, the pause in which we see Invincible out of reflex, he takes out all the Reanimen out of anger and just kind of survival reflex. He slaughters them in a way that's somewhat similar to Omni-Man, slaughtering the Guardians of the Globe in front of the new Guardians. And I love like there's a look of it's like not horror per se, but there's kind of like an acknowledgement. And I think the real question is, I don't think Cecil did that intentionally. I think Cecil felt bad that Mark was about to be beaten within an inch of his life, and he stopped. That's what I think in my heart of hearts is what's happening here. But there is a tactical version of this where Cecil wants to show them the danger that Mark poses, and in shutting them off, him slaughtering them gives them kind of a haunting look at like here's what he's capable of.
Yeah, and the kind of lethality and the way he moves kind of like how a lot of his multiverse or variants move.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, with where things end up for Robot at the end of this episode, like when he decides to join Invincible side and his reasoning for it deep down, I would not be surprised if Robot is already aware or has the inklings of where Mark could go, with his multiverse of variants, and is accounting for that and trying to either have contingencies in place to stop Invincible or to have Invincible work for him.
Yeah. Yeah, let's say we might have a big robot story coming down the line. I don't know when or how soon, but we might.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Okay, anyway, point being, so the team breaks up, and this is again solid arguments with the exception of one. So Kate and the Immortal. Kate's very insensitive to Ray. By the way, I just want to shout this out too. I don't want to be. I'm not just throwing this in there for like biased reason. I'm just saying in general. I've always really liked Shrinking Ray for a variety of reasons, but I was just kind of reminded of when she was kind of back and after sick leave, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
of being horrifically swallowed.
Yeah.
Um, I always love that. It's kind of, there's a weird comparison, but I mean, Grey Delisle's, Grey Griffin, she plays Shrinking Ray, and one I'm always head over heels for Grey Delisle, frankly. But beyond that, I love that she's playing her kind of very like a Jack Kirby character, playing her very kind of like a girl from Brooklyn, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's just something really just kind of street level about her that just kind of works. She's kind of like an Ant Man with attitude. I don't know.
She's got the moxie.
Yeah, she's got mox. Love it. So, anyways, and I do think there are some hints that maybe she and Rex might get together, possibly.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the sort of the dynamic between the two, because I would never expected like them to have some kind of level of chemistry or inkling for one another. Which, by the by, like it's really well done. It's not kind of hitting you in the head And I think, depending on how things go out, I would not be surprised if, this is one of the more interesting or, you know, and like compelling pairings on the show.
Right. Let's see oh, right. So, with that said, so yeah, anyway, so with this, Kate's very insensitive to Ray, and I understand that Kate has like the trauma of like multiple deaths, but I'm absolutely on Ray and Rex's side here, where ultimately Ray's side, where it's like, look, Kate had a contingency where she always, at all times, she's had apparently at all times she's had like the one Kate duplicate, like in a remote or a protected remote location. So, saying that she put as much on the line, that she went through as much as they did, and at the very least, her belittling, well, it's poor choice of words in Ray's case, but like putting down,
Minimizing.
minimize minimizing Ray's trauma, and like her trying to get back on the horse after being swallowed.
Well, and also just like I feel like the Shrieking Ray, if I was her, it's like you got to walk away from the superhero life.
Didn't tell anyone, and almost got Rex killed because of it. By the
Yeah,
way,
yeah. Whereas if
no
I
apology. She
died,
never apologized for that too. By the way,
yeah. It's like I died, I can't come back. I'm dead. My like future's gone. You got to have a future with your like hot Abraham Lincoln immortal boyfriend.
I still love, that's my favorite thing in Invincible, but I still love that Abraham Lincoln is technically the immortal did become Abraham Lincoln in this universe.
That for me, I just kind of wonder: is that public knowledge of the immortal? I assume not.
No, I don't think it's public knowledge. I just think I don't even know how many superheroes know. I'm just saying that is something we saw in the. So it's from the comic, and I believe it's something we saw a glimpse. We had like a brief flash of it in when we brought back the immortal. So yeah, he was Lincoln.
Just imagine you wake up as the immortal, and then like you can see your face on currency.
God. I think with the immortal, just be like, oh, what now? I think he'd be really humble about it. Like, oh, now my face is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and that's the thing. So the immortal's very much she's like Cecil's kind of staunch defender, and he's making some insensitive comments too about like he's always been soft on him like his father. Oh yeah, soft on him like his father. Did you see the end of season one? All right. You were just beating up on Alan the alien in season two, which is why you went off to be depressed Lincoln in a log cabin, and you found Kate. Right, that's what you did.
Oh, also, without like supervillain twins, you would have just been a decapitated body. So
Yeah,
like, let's not.
exactly. So so the point being, the immortal, he could have been a little more understanding as well.
Yeah, it's that's the thing. It's
I
like
was in some true hypocrisy there. Like, you guys have kept secrets, and you let people suffer, and you didn't apologize once. Like, Kate's like, we're calling Kate out, and the immortal says like, "Hey, Kate's been through stuff." It's like, well, yeah. I mean, what about near murder on Rex here by her brother's hand because she couldn't even send him, hey, a letter or a postcard or something.
also the immortal is not the one. Shouldn't be the guy to tell everyone to like calm down and have a good sense of their.
Yeah, exactly. He's like torn people in half.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, let's see. Okay, right. So again, like I said, poor. Unfortunately, I think Kirkman's just going to bear the. He's going to have another. It's going to be another Amber situation with Kate because people are really hating on Kate for this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I think Kirkman's going to be smart. He's going to struggle off. Like, well, I mean, people disagree sometimes. I think he's right. We don't always have to like Kate technically, and from what I understand in the comics, she had kind of moments like that too. So I don't think it was exactly like this scene, but I think she had like moments where she would like. I think someone cited this. There was like it was like someone like threw like a page from the comic where it was like her being really catty about Eve.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think Kate's had her petty moments. It seems, and this is probably one of them.
I think part, and I guess part of it is just like it must not be easy to have multi-policy brother, B, to have a superpower where like you get to make multiple versions of yourself and maybe get to learn a set of skills or talents, but you're not really like all that powerful. You're just basically infinite cannon fodder.
Yeah, exactly.
The old
And you have to
deaths.
watch yourself die like horrifically every time.
And you get to feel each deaths and pain. So
Yeah.
if anything, it's you're kind of lucky
She's
that
Mickey 17, Infinity.
yeah, but if anything, it's like it's surprising how much Kate isn't, that much of a like catty individual. Like
Yeah.
that kind of like think of how much Rex had to like how much of a jerk he was at the beginning, and for the most part, like his power set is pretty. It doesn't cause him a significant amount of pain and suffering. Uh, so for all intents and purposes, I think Kate's like holding it pretty well together. Like she, at least as compared to the immortal. The immortal, he needs to see therapy. Maybe the same therapist as whatever Darkwing 2 is seeing, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right, let's see. So we have the divide here. The team kind of splits off. We Samson's like the level-headed one of the bunch. Honestly, Samson should be team leader. Let's just throw that out there. But Samson, he's level-headed. He wants to change things from the inside. That's kind of his perspective on things. The immortal and Kate stay behind, and Shapesmith stays behind only because he has a race car bed. Um, Beyond that, Robot, he wants to stay on Invincible's good side for kind of some future plans that he's got there, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Everyone else walks out on Cecil, and we've added Darkwing to the roster. Our post-credit scene, after all this sad stuff happened, also we had like the flashback in which we saw Cecil meet Nolan, and we see he didn't trust him from the beginning, but he did know what the like channel into something positive while they keep tabs on him.
Mm-hmm.
Which it was good to see. A little J.K. Simmons goes a long way.
Yeah.
Okay, so post credit scene. All after all this horrible stuff happens, horrible in a good way. We have a happy little silver lining of Mark and Eve. They're dating now. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, no, I think the way that moment played out, it was really one quality writing and also quality voice acting on both Stephen Yoon's part and Gillian Jacobs's part.
And this is like something this is like the spirit of the comic, by the way. This is the whole thing. Like when we have those Mark and Eve relationship moments, they do feel like this. They feel like these two really get each other. They really it's a unique relationship that because I mean we didn't really address it, but we've had like we had Eve talk to Amber and everything, and they kind of smooth things over. They're pals, and they kind of accepted it. So this is fated.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to episode 3. You want a real costume, right?
Yeah, seeing Mark in his black and blue fatigues was certainly a sight to see, as well as other stuff in this episode.
Yeah, yeah. As we know, folks, costume change. It's not that simple. That's a running gag we're trying to bring back. Yeah, I guess in general, the whole conflict between superheroes too. It's not that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the Big Oliver episode. We put Oliver in the field. We have that kid. I tell you, man, the Christian. What was the last name of the kid?
Convery.
Henri.
Convery.
Con- okay,
Convry.
Convery. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Christian Convery. Again, already I knew from Sweet Tooth, good actor, but he's got Robin chops, man.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I guess we should start the silent. How did you feel about the silent artsy opening of the episode?
I was taken aback because that's not usually something that Invincible does uh, as like a storytelling choice. Uh, and I think if I were to rewatch this episode, I'd appreciate where it went. I think for what it did, I think it's reflective of sort of the whole idea that for this season, the real world starts to kind of encroach in on sort of these like in this very superhero world, and seeing these sort of this couple that has history robbing banks, is trying to make by, but can't make it too far, and then has to come back. It's kind of going back to sort of the themes about like, hey, on the road to redemption, like how easy is that road going to be for some people, and this and because of that difficulties, it's just then natural for some of those people to kind of go back to like their old habits.
Yeah, again, I think it fits into the whole the redemption theme of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked it. I thought it's the theme of reform. It shows like the factors that Invincible is kind of ignoring in the recidivism thing. He's we have a couple of villains we've seen before in the big battle beast moment from season one. I'm blanking on their name. I meant to look them up. I meant to look up the names, but I'd like to get the guy who could turn into the guy who could like superheat himself. And we had the guy with the cool like alien backpack, tongue thing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah. So he's like these. I love their average Joes who are trying to they're trying to get by honestly. I love it goes full circle. Like they robbed the bank and then they kind of ran from essentially they ran from the knockoff Invincible with Bulletproof. I always love that, by the way. That Bulletproof is wearing the costume that Art tried to push onto Invincible. I love that so much.
Mm-hmm.
But I do love Bio. It's an undersold moment. But in episode 2, we did have that great moment where he's the one who says, I would like to hear what Invincible has to say. I love that moment for him. This guy's. I was afraid he was going to be because I do remember. Here's the thing: there is a character in the comic. I'm pretty sure is him, but I don't know 100% because I think they alter. I think they alter his hairstyle in Invincible on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't. When we eventually see this other character, I don't know. I assume it's him because it make the most sense for it to be him, and I really hope so because I love the arc of Bulletproof. If that's the case, just the idea that we have the guy who is kind of like in Invincible's shadow and kind of like and kind of following his influence. In a sense, he's kind of an indirect kind of mentor to this character. Perhaps I don't know. At the very least, he's just kind of like a. I mean, this is going to be a bad comparison. Maybe some vague Sam Wilson vibes. Maybe.
Or like James Rhodes or John Henry Irons,
Right.
kind of the
There you go. Steele's a better comparison on that one. Sure. Probably. Yeah. It's
character
probably.
that gets his own superhero identity.
Yeah. There you go. Anyway, yeah. So the point being, we evade his capture, and then we have the bank robber. And then they go through all this thing. We see times are tough, unfortunately, and they end up getting they end up homeless on the street because rent keeps going up, and the job doesn't pan out for them. No one's hiring ex-cons, and yeah, it's just they end up in battle with Invincible and Oliver, and like the implication is that they might have contemplated having like adopting a kid or something, and there's like humanity. It's not spelled out, but that's just kind of the vibe I get from it because like the backpack's kind of their kid, and they keep looking at like couples with kids on the streets, and they're kind of looking at them wistfully. It makes me think perhaps there was a hope that they get their lives together, maybe they could have a family. And anyway, so we see some humanity with Oliver, and the moment that happens, defeated at the hands of Invincible, and I just love that it's Mark kind of like crushing the hopes and dreams of these characters without even knowing, and again, it just fits into that whole thing of him, the danger of him just blatantly shutting down, uh, you know, him shutting down
His
the
humanity.
reform, shutting down like the chance at redemption and reform and all that.
It's a very Nolan Grayson way of thinking.
Yep, but again, unintentionally. That's the saving grace. He's not doing it on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
A different universe's Mark absolutely would do it on purpose, but not this guy.
Especially the cannibal one.
Well, yeah.
He would just eat the bad guys.
Well, yeah. Okay, so Art. Art makes a new costume for Mark, which again, shadow of the evil Mark Grayson's from the multiverse with the costume change.
Mm-hmm.
Darker than it's darker for the darker turn of the season for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And you seem to really like it.
No, I think it's a it's kind of cool for Invincible to do the trope of like, oh, the traditional superhero gets like an alternate edgy costume, kind of like the black and white symbiote suit, or
Yeah,
you know, uh, like the when Captain
John
America
the John
has,
Paul Valley batsuit, that kind of.
or the Captain America like the captain suit that essentially becomes the U.S. agent suit.
Yeah, nomad suit.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, let's see. Anyway, yeah. The so in yeah, so we have the kid on. I will say this. Okay, so sorry. Before we get to that, with the suit, I do think I don't know if this is from the comic. I have to imagine it was, but I'm on the fence about Invincible because it just seems to be like, okay, come on, guys, the exact same costume, only the colors are different. That's like, it's obviously the same guy. But by
Yeah,
the
I feel
same
like
token, though, I love the mundane idea that if you change your costume, people aren't going to necessarily, because you have a secret identity, they're not going to know. It's a very Spider-Man going to the bank problem, and I really like that. But by the same token, it's like Invincible, it's like it's the same. I don't know.
yeah, I feel like it would have made sense to have that name applied for Oliver.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what throws me off about it. It just feels like it's kind of funny, but it's like when he has like the kid's sidekick around there. I don't know.
Or at least people would have made like jokes or comments as like, "Oh, you're ripping off the other guy."
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's great too. But we didn't,
Mhm.
it's went with Invincible. They can't all be winners. All the jokes can't like land like right on the money.
Mhm.
Anyway, so we broached the topic of the damage that Dad did on Earth to Oliver. We kind of breached the subject to him, and I love it. It's like kind of it's like telling the kid about Santa Claus, kind of a moment, somewhat, or like telling like Dad's a kind of a bad person, and he knows this. But I love the kid's like again, it's legit kid writing here. Where on Oliver's the whole season, where we scold him a lot, but I genuinely believe because of the performance, the kid just doesn't get it, which leads to the trouble. Is that he does mean well, and I absolutely believe he means well, but he just doesn't get right from wrong. And for
Yeah.
what he wants to do, he's becoming a hero only because his brother's a hero, and his father was at least in the to him was a hero, and in general was in the guise. He thinks it's the family business, but he doesn't get the. He's not seeing he's not seeing the error. He's not seeing the arc of he missed out on the end of season one, to put it simple.
Well, I think part of it is just like his physiology because he has to go through. Because I think if he were to grow up as like a traditional normal human, and like if he was an alien, but if like somehow his genes worked in where he like had the normal stages of maturation,
Yeah, if
like
like Mark, if he had 17 years of being a normal kid, he might have seen the world differently because he wouldn't
yeah,
be unkillable.
yeah, and so and also on by the same token, I think maybe physiologically like I don't want to be too essentialist with alien species. And I don't think the Kirk would ever have this way, but it's like probably like for considering he's like half of his DNA is from a species that have a very short lifespan. Like the value of life maybe isn't so innate in his mind because
That's true. That's a good point.
and also I think
All the people he based, so he has essentially. This is kind of it. I'm sorry, I was just going to have this idea in the moment.
mhm,
Yeah, his worldview essentially is what Nolan's side of the whole think mark scene was, where it's like, what will you have in 500 years? In his sense, like everyone he loves and cares about is going to be dead within months. So by that logic, it's like he has Nolan's worldview on fast forward. Like he's absolutely on board with Nolan's saying, because he knows, like for a fact, like yeah, everyone I know, like they're going to age rapidly and then be gone.
mhm.
You know?
Yeah, and I think that's where Oliver's so eager to go out there and do his thing because maybe in his mind is like, well, like even though I'm half Ultraman, I'm half my other species. Like, how much time do I have? So I think that like impatience and recklessness that comes from places like, look, I don't have much time to live. I got to make the most out of it. Which I, having that kind of perspective, like it kind of makes sense for why Oliver is just so gung ho want to be a hero, because like if he waits too long, he might not have the chance to be a hero. I mean, if he just doesn't age further to die at a certain point.
Well,
But
that's true. Now, and then mind you, I don't want to say too much about things, but let's just say for the most part, I don't have the exact years per se on this, but I want to say just going off this, I don't know if they might change anything, but off the top of my head, I would say that just based on how Viltrumites age, I think he might have found a loophole with the whole, like, for example, I don't think he's going to die as fast as his mother and like the rest of the species did. I think he's going to age fast, mind you. I'm just saying, I think the Viltrumite part of his DNA might allow him to live a lot longer than they would
Mhm.
comparatively. I'm just saying, for example, it might be like a normal lifespan compared to a Viltrumite, but more than he would have had on his own.
Yeah.
So I think he's gonna land somewhere in the middle there. So I think, for example, like I genuinely can't recall when he might hit adulthood, or if he does hit adulthood, frankly. But I don't know if he makes the cut or not. He might,
Mhm.
but that's the thing. So I don't know, like if you'd hit that maybe about like season 5 or season 4 or not. I don't know. Anywho, let's see. So, point being, we try to explain this to Oliver. But again, I love the hope, the optimistic hope that again is kind of hypocritical for Mark, but by the same token, that you kind of get is that the hope of turning, like Oliver wants to turn the Omni Man logo into a tribute to his dad
Mhm.
and ultimately redeem it. Which I think Mark deep down he wants that too, and I think he's truthful when he tells him maybe someday, but not now. And I think that's maybe on some level he's coming around. I think on some level he is coming around the Cecil's line of thinking about the whole like giving people seconds. I think deep down, because of his father, because of his hopes for his father at least, he knows Cecil's kind of right about that. But because of the D.A. Sinclair thing, he really doesn't want to admit it to being right, and he's letting emotions blind him over Darkwind.
Yeah. And then by the same token, like with Oliver's actions in that show, and the third and episode 3, Oliver in a way kind of is along the same lines as Cecil, which I think Mark is also scared about.
Yeah,
You know, Oliver isn't super focused on wanting being a genuinely good guy, but more about stopping the bad guy, I which are two different things, and I really appreciate the show kind of delving into what that actually means.
yeah. Meanwhile, Debbie Grayson, she's dating Paul, not multi Paul, different Paul.
It's always funny that Paul is not just a stand-in for just a guy that like a female character is just dating, off to the side. It's just kind of like Bob or Jen.
Yeah. But like we set up Paul last season, we're actually kind of doing stuff with Paul here. Be hilarious if we reveal that he was like a multi-Paul clone, but clearly it's not the case. But yeah, so Debbie, she's having trouble getting Oliver to listen, and she ends up letting Paul into the fold on Invincible, and she does without asking Mark, which I do feel was an overstep on her part, but we kind of addressed it. I think Debbie deserves a little happiness. We've seen her just try and let people in, or try to have someone she can talk to about the stuff she's all alone right now. Um, I think she's justified in what she's doing. It is hilarious though, seeing like Mark just trying to rationalize. Oh, we came from a convention.
I feel like it would have been hilarious if they just kept the bit for a moment. It's like, oh, what's with all the blood? It's like, oh, this is just fake.
Yeah, God, it would have been so funny.
Really got our friends to get us, do all the works.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is fake blood. That's actually like ketchup from the hot dog that we had. It's like, it's
Man.
yeah. All right, let's see. Okay, so let's talk about the centerpiece scene of the episode. So the Mauler twins. They possibly meet their demise here, like for keepsies.
Before we get to that, R.I.P. to those two soldiers that were guarding that nuclear
Yeah, the
facility.
coffee machine guys. It was brutal. I mean, plus I love at least we've set up that the lizard that's exactly where the lizard like broke in. It was really sad too when we did in season two. So it's like, oh man, that's a doomed area of the Pentagon. I love it we call out too that yeah, they don't reinforce these walls. It's your tax dollars at work.
It's as doomed as the defense against the dark arts position in Hogwarts.
Okay,
Come on, Dragon. You know what I mean by that.
yeah. You said the dark arts section of Hogwarts?
No, dark arts position.
Oh, dark hearts position.
The dark arts, like the position in Hogwarts, defense against the dark arts. No one lasts beyond a year.
Okay. Anyway, so yeah, so R.I.P. Let's pour some coffee out to the coffee machine, guys. Just don't use that coffee machine. Anyway, Mauler twins. They built an EMP missile, and a long story short, they're going to basically charge the world to turn the lights back on
Mm-hmm.
because they're not just the supervillains; they've graduated to businessmen. God,
That
I really this I can't for the life of me I can't remember we have like multiverse and stuff, so I'm not going to say it's impossible they couldn't come back, but I do think this might be the last of for the Muller twins, and if so, I will miss them because I always loved the subversion that we had Kevin Michael Richardson playing these. The moment we saw the Maulers, we made the assumption there was going to be like brutes or like like dumb kind of twin brutes or something like fuzzy lumpkins. You want to use Powerpuff Girls terminology,
or like Tweedledee or Tweedledum.
yeah, Tweedledee, Tweedledum. This would have been kind of a duo of just kind of lunkheads. But the
Mhm.
fact that they were like the smartest, some of the smartest villains in the show. Oh god, and they were funny and they looked cool and they were bruisers and just, they were fantastic. And it's so sad to see them go potentially.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's, I say that they're dead for keeps because the idea is at least if one of them survived, they would be fine. But we kill them both pretty brutally, in
Yeah.
fact. We break the jaw on one. So again, I love we do kind of a nod to Donner Superman here, where the missile goes off and Mark has to go and stop it. He tells Oliver to go home. He does not listen. Takes on the Maulers and he does not hold back. He does not pull his punches and ends up. I think the kids on the internet are calling it he Goku'd Goku versus King Piccolo. One of them.
Or he just did it did the move that Raiden does in Mortal Kombat, where he just kind of storms through a guy's chest.
Yeah. Yeah.
The look of that other Mauler twin as Oliver's approaching, or just looking at him, all covered in blood. Well,
You're in trouble. Yeah, so I felt that to me was the chilling moment of just like the one Mauler, just again because he knows like okay look if I survive we're gonna be fine. Just like I give up with a broken jaw, and we know Oliver can plainly hear him, but he just doesn't care, and he just he just kills him. It's like oh no, because my heart of hearts is like no, we need a Mauler alive, no. But also then it's like, no, Oliver, don't do it. Just like the other one was defensible. The other one was an actual accident. This one, no.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, he it's very much kind of a Jason Todd, Damian Wayne kind of a moment there where he had like, kind of the cute sidekick just kind of, do it committing this, committing this grave act and very taking a moral stance on it.
Yeah.
And I love the Guardians, including the Immortal. They're just kind of stunned and surprised. And I love Goggins is so freaking good. Just he shows up, he's supportive and nurturing to Oliver again, kind of doing the father figure thing for him, which is exactly what Oliver keeps getting told. No, no, no. And Cecil's like, he's giving him understanding, saying, "Look, I know you do what you had to do. It's okay."
Mm-hmm.
And Mark's not having it, and then Cecil comes in with that barb, like training him in the family business. Are we? Oh, it was such Cecil. Come on, man, you're better than that.
He's not though, and I love that about Cecil to a certain degree.
Yeah, I know. It's just the fact that again, it breaks my heart when Cecil and Mark don't get along. It's like why can't the kids get along? Let's see. So we have this. It's baffling to Invincible. This kid has the same mentality as his father from season one, and just again, just this. The kids asking. It's this prolific moment of Oliver asking you why murder is wrong. Like life is precious. Like, no, it's not. They don't. Even people that don't have powers, they kill each other. Why? Why? Why should it be precious? Why should we treat it the same way? Maybe Dad was right. You ever think about that? So, Roy, I want to tell you this because a lot of people have brought this up about the episode here. Okay,
Mhm.
um, there's a very specific line in this scene that they cut from the comic. Very specific. Sure, you might have heard about it. So right after that, right after the big line of like, what if Dad was right? We kind of cut to the next scene. In the comic, there was a pause, and then Mark said, "Sometimes." Now, some people have felt like, why the heck did we cut that line? That was a big moment. That was kind of a cool moment from from the story. I think they made the absolute right decision in cutting that line because it would undercut everything Mark's kind of been doing up to this point. If he says sometimes, it does makes you think like, man, he really is hypocritical like in a huge way there, right?
Yeah, I kind of maybe that line is probably saved for late. I wouldn't be surprised that
Yeah,
maybe
that's the thing. They might be saving it for later, maybe. I don't know, but that I'm just saying, it was a right call to cut it in this moment.
or maybe that line would have probably fit if Oliver asked Cecil that question. Maybe Cecil would have been one that said sometimes,
Yeah,
and that would have been cool because as much as Cecil is like cautious and concerned about Nolan and his threat to the planet, Nolan and Cecil operate on similar enough wavelengths.
yeah. Only he doesn't look at humanity as pets.
Yeah.
So so we have so this is really kind of interesting. So the aftermath is we have Debbie having a chat with Oliver here, and I think like a champ again. I worship the ground that Sandra walks on. I really do.
Mhm.
Like a champ, she works some mom magic here, explaining like the morality essentially. Explaining that just because you haven't met these people doesn't mean that they don't care about they don't love their mothers and love their families the way you love me and everything. And basically, this is the conversation that Debbie and I think Mark wishes that Debbie had with Nolan before it was too late. And you have to wonder, like, had she made a now, mind you, it worked wonders because Oliver was literally raised by Debbie, and that really helps. So a lot of that. I know it's like not it wouldn't be exactly the same thing, but it does make you wonder though if Debbie had a heart to heart conversation with Nolan, maybe making because again she was able to reach him like we saw in like the big climactic scene the whole in season one her explaining like the love for his own child and it did kind of reach him. It does make me wonder had Debbie like had Nolan had revealed his intentions to Debbie. You think Debbie may have had a shot at maybe like talking him off the ledge a little or at least getting him to a point of change maybe.
I probably not because
Yeah, probably not, but
yeah, because Nolan is like a Viltrumite who's been like raised deep in that propaganda, and it took a lot from what happened in season one, season two to kind of break out of that.
mm,
And I don't think just one like Oliver being the age he is and him being raised by Debbie, he emotionally kind of latches on. And the thing is, I think because of how like short like his mom was, his like biological mom was in his life, for all intents and purposes, Debbie is like Oliver's real mom.
yeah.
So I think Oliver is probably more likely to be swayed. And I think depending upon how the Viltrumites, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I just get into details about what happens when the Viltrumites eventually show up. I wouldn't be surprised if Oliver maybe is seeing how the Viltrumites treat others, especially people like his mom, Debbie. I think Oliver's going to hopefully go through some changes and become sort of a more, morally, kept together individual.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's wishful. I think it's still like wishful thinking though on their part. Where I don't know, on some part, like if only it were that easy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, point being, it's like again, fingers crossed. Oliver's seen the light here, but again, it's just kind of the pattern of he keeps making promises and like saying that he gets it, but does he really? And it doesn't seem to be. We might have a legit problem with Oliver. I think more so it's going to be Cecil's going to have to get involved with Oliver if he's that powerful, and then I think Mark's going to feel a way about it. I think basically Oliver's going to be kind of the Bucky in this situation here in the Civil War conflict, maybe.
Or the Jason Todd, or the Damian
Yeah.
Wayne, or insert any superhero young person
Well,
that.
well, no. With Bucky, I meant specifically like he's going to be the whole like we're going to go to war over like what to do with Bucky in
Mhm.
Civil War kind of a thing. But.
Yeah.
Okay, so our post-credit scene. We had like something is monitoring Mark. We initially thought it was Cecil, but we reveal it is not Cecil. It is Angstrom Levy.
Yeah, I'm very. I didn't recognize it was Levy until like put up the X-ray thing
Subtitles.
for Amazon, and I have questions. I don't know if
Yep.
you'll be able to answer it because you want to preserve.
One thing I don't want to give it away.
Is there a cool reveal about Angstrom Levy at the end of this episode that will hopefully fall upon in the season, or
I'm sorry about what episode?
so no, like, so is there a cool specific reveal about Angstrom Levy at the end of this episode that will eventually be revealed down the line?
Down the line, yes. I just don't know how soon we're gonna do it because this makes me think if they're doing this and he's being monitored, I think they would probably inquire about it. So I wonder if by the end, it feels like. Okay, sorry. If I'm a betting man, I would say we might touch on him again at the post credit. We might have a better reveal. Sometimes these post credit scenes are like full scenes instead of like little teases. So it does make me think perhaps the very end of the season we will see Levy again and tee him up for next season. That is my guess.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, they could weave him in. We still have some episodes left. We've seen how dense the material is. We could do a lot. I know what the big finale is going to be this season.
Mhm.
Not again. I don't know. No, I'm just saying. I know what the big draw is going to be this season. I can only imagine they have to use that person
Yeah.
for the finale, and I'm not joking. It is like the one of the big things I'm so hyped for in Invincible from the comic. It was like this huge moment. It was like, oh god, I forgot that we would do that. We would probably do it this early in season three. That's incredible to me. That's gonna be great.
Yeah.
This is gonna be so. This season is gonna end very climactically. It's gonna be you're probably wondering how the heck do we keep topping these season finales? We essentially had a multiverse version of Spider-Man cross. We had a Spider-Man crossover in last season. How do we top that? Oh boy, just wait.
Yeah.
All right. So, also not just Spider-Man, it's Spider-Man and Batman.
Oh yeah.
Technically, yeah, it's incredible. Okay, so that brings us to the end. Again, we'll be covering this week to week, going forward. And again, I don't. Might be a revolving panel of guests. I mean, we'll see. We have some episodes left. I'm sure we'll be doubling back a little. Maybe a few multi. Oh, actually, before we go, um, yeah, the introduction instead of the blood spatter. We're doing some kind of multiverse fritzing.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I
that's
like
kind of
that.
cool. Yeah, just want to
We
throw that in there.
be very interested to see what the final title sequence will look like at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean that again too makes me think. I don't know if it's just thematic for like the direction that Mark's heading in, or maybe it does in fact tie into kind of our post credit scene on episode three. Maybe
Mhm.
I don't know. Both are possible. Regardless, we will continue to recap and react to the ongoings of Invincible season three next week. See you then, folks.
Have a good night.